restored it pretty much to what you see today, and then we've used it as a family ever since. So 64 years. I'm not 64 old yet.
No, that's all right. Should we have a little look around it while we're here? All right. So, what does it mean to you to own such an important piece of Aston Martin history?
It's pretty special. It's funny though, because having been brought up with it, you sort of tend to get used to it, and doing things like this make you realise actually how special it is. I'm really proud of it. It's something I've grown up with, and it's been here all my life, and it's part of my growing up with my dad. It's our history, and just having something that is so historic is a real privilege, really. And it is you don't own it. I'm looking after it for the next generation, which hopefully will be my son. So I don't own it. I'm just looking after it.
And so, what's the story behind the name the Green Pea?
That's all a bit of a mystery. So it was a works car in 22, and in 23 it got sold to Marion Agnew, who raced it with her friend Bobby Morgan, and they called it Green Pea. And my dad met them in the 70s and asked them, why did you call it Green Pea? And they couldn't remember. They think it might have been a play on Grand Prix Green Pea, and it was green and it was small. So that's the best they could come up with.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, should we just have a little look around it? What are some of the cool details about this thing? Obviously, we've got this logo here is what we're actually going to be running on this car this weekend, if I remember correctly.
Right. Cable brakes will be a thing of interest that you don't see those at all nowadays.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And interestingly enough, it's got four-wheel brakes, which was quite advanced for its time. But the foot brake works the front, and the handbrake works the rear, so that's a bit of a challenge. Not a challenge, but you just need to remember.
I mean, I'm just looking at this here.
Yeah. That's your water temperature.
Okay.
That tells you how hot you're running. So I have it this way, so there's a hole here, and as long as I can't see it, it's all good. So you don't need to worry. If you can't see it's like a thermometer.
Okay.
If you can't see the red in the windows, it's all good, really.
All right, there you go.
So you run it on that and the oil pressure.
Yeah.
And as long as oil temperature and pressure, as long as those are all good, you're happy, you're good to go.
And so one thing I've noticed as well is obviously this race car is a two-seater. Now, if I remember correctly, it's because the person in the passenger seat was actually a mechanic.
That's right. So in the Grand Prix in those days, the only people allowed to work on them were the driver and the mechanic. Oh. So you'd have a pit, which was basically a table, and the crew could put what was needed on the table, right? And then they had to pick it up. They couldn't hand it to them. They had to put it on the table, and then they could pick it up.
Oh, right.
So the only people that would work on the car were those two people. So, your 2-second pit stops that you have nowadays were certainly not happening then.
Yeah, definitely not.
But they were running 300 and, I can't remember, I think it was 360 miles was the race. So 6.5 hour race. So completely different from nowadays. It was in 22. 20 cars started and only 3 finished, so it was speed, but it was attrition as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, looking at the driver's cockpit, completely different to obviously what we are used to. Can you run me through what's going on over here?
So we've got the gear lever on the outside, and this is the handbrake. Gearbox is round the other way to any sort of modern car you would drive. Yep. This is your hand throttle here, and it's not got an automatic ignition advance. This is how you advance the ignition. So we start it up with it retarded, and then you advance it when you want to go faster.
Right. There you go.
And then also the other thing is this thing here.
Yeah.
So it has got a pressure-fed tank. It doesn't have a normal fuel pump. What you do is you pressurise the tank, and that forces the fuel through to the carburetors. So that's the mechanic's job, is to keep an eye on that and make sure that's running at about 2 pounds.
Yeah, right. So
you run out of fuel.
The mechanic's got his own kind of little dash on that side, just as well as the driver.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Look it all in there. Very, very cool. See the pedals all the way through there.
Yeah. So the pedals are, modern people would say they're round the wrong way, because it's got a centre throttle instead of having clutch, brake, accelerator. It's clutch, accelerator, brake.
Okay.
Us vintage car drivers say they're round the right way.
Yeah.
But for this, because you need to double declutch when you're changing down, it is round the right way, because you can brake with your toe and hit the accelerator with your heel, which in a modern car is very difficult. You have to rock your foot, but in this it's very easy. So it does make sense with this style of gearbox to have them that way around.
And so what is this like to drive? Like, obviously it's going to be completely foreign to your normal race car driving experience. Like, run me through that.
It's always a really difficult question for me to answer, because this is the first car I ever drove.
Oh, right.
So I've been driving this for 42 years.
Yeah.
And I think compared to a lot of vintage cars, I think they're actually very easy to drive. The gears change quite nicely.
Yeah.
It's just a few little things. The clutch is a little bit different from modern cars. You can't slip it quite as well as you can with modern cars.
Okay.
But it's very easy. It's steering, because of the narrow tyres, the steering's pretty light.
Yeah.
The brakes for how fast it will go and what it weighs are pretty good.
Yeah.
And if you get into real trouble, you can always use the handbrake. So.
There you go. I mean, does the handbrake make it skid like you would in a road car?
You can. I've had it where I've been racing and it's in the wet and I've got into a bit of trouble. I've grabbed the handbrake and ended up sideways across the track. So I don't do that very often if I can avoid it.
Yeah.
But it will. Yeah, you can handbrake turn it if you want to.
Nice. And then, so how excited are you about having our four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel drive this car?
That's pretty special, I would say. I'll be really interested to see what he thinks of it. And it's always nice, to be honest, it's nice to just have people sharing the experience.
Yeah.
And, it'll be really interesting to see what Seb thinks of it. But, yeah, it's special, definitely special.
And so, obviously having this car for quite a few years, what are some of the more interesting stories that you could tell us about where this car's been and what it's done, and for yourself as well?
Well, so we've raced it all of our lives. So I started racing this when I was 19, and pretty much just raced in Britain with us. But in the 20s, it raced in France, a lot in France. There's some good stories of my mum and dad driving it on the road. It's just a quick story. So my mum and dad are sat in this, going down to Devon to this hill climb. Mum sat here, dad's here. Come round the corner, a lorry comes the other way. Dad steers left to miss it, hits the bank. My mum goes up in the air, lands on the tail, grabs hold of the steering. So this dent here comes made by my mum when she landed out of the car.
So your mum's now part of the history of this car?
My mum is definitely part of the history, yeah.
There you go.
And it's interesting, I think if I was to sell this and buy something else, my dad would say, okay, fair enough, but I don't think my mum would forgive me, because this is part of our family growing up, so it's, one of the family, really.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine, this being the first car you ever experienced. I mean, mine definitely wasn't this interesting, I'll tell you that much.
But it's your starting point, isn't it? So you have nothing else to compare it to.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. I mean, is it possible to have a look under the hood as well?
Yeah, sure. So originally, in 22, it had a 16-valve twin-cam engine. Mm-hmm. Then it was fitted with a side-valve engine, and now it's got this engine, which is an 8-valve twin-cam.
Okay.
But this is the last engine made by Aston Martin under the founding owners. So when Bamford and Martin owned Aston Martin, this is the last engine they made, it's actually a 1924 engine. But there's only one of those engines that's unique, and that is a really good little engine actually. But it's only 1.5 litres, and you can't really see, but it's this big, it's massive.
Yeah, right.
It's a massive 1.5 litre engine.
And so how much of this is original? Obviously, as time goes on, things do need to be changed, lines and rubber and stuff does change. But
so the original stuff is radiator and chassis.
Yep.
This steering column was fitted in 24 by Marion and Bobby.
Yeah.
Because the original Aston Martins had almost no lock, and it was a real pain driving it on the road. So they fitted this steering column, which gave them more lock.
Yep.
So chassis, all the bulkheads, they're original.
Yeah.
What else is with gear lever, gearbox is original. Most of the back axle, but it actually blew up the back axle in the 30s, so that's been replaced. It's of the time stuff. These carbs are interesting.
Yeah.
They were, so Bobby and Marion in 24 bought these carbs to get more power in their side valve engine, but fitted a different engine.
Right.
Kept them on the shelf for some reason, even though they sold their cars.
Yeah.
73, they met my dad. In 75, they said, we've got something for you. And they gave him these carburetors, and they were fitted on the car. It was 55 years after they were bought to go on the car.
Oh, right, there you go.
So, and they've been on there ever since.
That's so cool. I mean, looking in there compared to a modern engine bay, it's
simple.
Yeah. Well, it's what it needs to be, right?
Thankfully, it's simple. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to work on it. So.
Well, if you're the mechanic that's running along, as the car's racing, you want it to be as simple as possible, right?
Yeah. But in the day, it was high technology. You imagine this had a 16-valve, 1.5-litre engine, which is pretty high tech for its day.
Yeah.
And but still, for modern terms, still very basic. So, which is good for the enthusiasts because it means you can work on them, you can maintain them. You just really need a set of spanners and some oil because it does tend to lose oil.
Yeah, right. There you go. I mean, and back in the day, what would this have been like to race? Like,
I think so. It was interesting So the Grand Prix in the 20s, there were a lot less of them. There's only one main one, and that was the French Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal. So there was lots written in the lead up and lots written after the event.
Yeah.
And they describe how the Aston Martin seemed to change their gears very nicely and handle nicely. Shake their tail and go off down the road.
Yeah, right.
So I think it was a loose surface,
yeah,
which would have been difficult to drive. And funny enough, we went to the Centenary last week, and it was 35 degrees. But in 22, it was raining, so we were on the loose surface that was wet.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been challenging. They were doing 100 miles an hour for a very long period of time. It was basically a triangle of circuit. So they would come out of the corners, be up to speed, and then maintain that speed for a long time.
Yeah,
it would have been a bit moving all over the road.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so
quite the experience then.
Yeah, definitely. I think they were definitely heroes. I mean, in the Grand Prix in 22, one guy had a crash and died. So. Yeah.